In March 2025, Dina Boluarte achieved something almost unimaginable in modern politics, a 2% approval rating. 2%. That number is a headline shorthand for a deeper story: how a president could go from unexpected successor to one of the most reviled leaders in recent memory. The arc begins in December 2022. Pedro Castillo, a rural school teacher turned president, attempted to dissolve Congress in a bid to rewrite Peru's political order. His move failed. He was arrested. Vice President Dina Boluarte, a lawyer from Apurímac, was swept into the presidency not by election but by crisis. Overnight she inherited a country of 33 million people, a fractured Congress, and a long list of societal grievances. The dramatic context matters. Peru had already cycled through presidents and crises, institutions were strained and public trust low. Boluarte's ascent was framed by high expectations in the highlands and suspicion in Lima's elite neighborhoods. Her initial legitimacy was fragile, born more of constitutional procedure than popular mandate, and that fragility shaped everything that followed. This chapter sets the stage: a nation divided by geography and history, 33 million lives caught between regional loyalties, and a central state that often felt distant and unresponsive. The question became less about one person and more about whether Peru's political system could absorb shock without collapsing into prolonged unrest. Boluarte's background mattered. She came from Apurímac, a highland region marked by indigenous Quechua-speaking communities, subsistence agriculture, and a history of marginalization. That identity put her at odds with Lima's political center, a coastal metropolis that concentrates economic power, media, and national policymaking. Lima's districts, Miraflores, San Isidro, Barranco, are where corporate boardrooms and diplomatic residences cluster. The political currents here tend toward center-right and technocratic parties, and voters often prioritize stability, investment, and security. Beyond Lima, regional politics in Peru are diverse. Arequipa, the White City, sits in the southern Andes but is more urbanized and economically dynamic. Its politics blend regional autonomy demands with business-oriented pragmatism. Political movements there have historically championed fiscal decentralization and resistance to Lima's centralism. On the northern coast, Trujillo and Piura have their own local elites and conservative tendencies. Meanwhile, the highlands, Cusco, Ayacucho, Puno, and Apurímac, sustain a different political logic: histories of exclusion, strong indigenous identities, and electoral support for leftist or populist movements promising redistribution and recognition. Peruvian political parties reflect these divides. Parties like Acción Popular and the Partido Popular Cristiano find stronger bases in urban coastal districts. Peru Libre and other leftist formations draw votes in rural highland areas. But parties are volatile, often personalized around leaders rather than stable programs, which intensifies fragmentation. That fragmentation helps explain why a regional politician like Boluarte could briefly embody highland hopes while simultaneously alarming Lima-based elites who saw her as unpredictable or inexperienced in national governance. The highland regions are where Peru's cultural and political contrasts become tangible. In Cusco, Spanish colonial churches loom over markets where Quechua speakers sell handwoven textiles, a daily negotiation between heritage and the tourist economy centered on Machu Picchu. In Puno, communities on Lake Titicaca preserve Aymara traditions and communal decision-making. In Ayacucho, memories of violent conflict and state neglect shape political demands. These regions send strong signals in elections. They want representation that addresses land rights, infrastructure, local justice, and cultural recognition. When Boluarte assumed the presidency, many highland communities registered hope. For the first time in years, someone with a shared regional background was at the head of state. That initial optimism, however, was short-lived. Protesters from remote provinces poured onto highways and gathered in regional capitals when policies appeared to align more with Lima's elites than with local priorities. The breaking point came within weeks. On December 28, 2022, Boluarte declared a state of emergency as demonstrations spread. Security forces were deployed. For communities already skeptical of central authority, heavy-handed responses felt like betrayal. What followed was an escalation of mistrust. Road blockades disrupted supply chains, regional economies contracted, and the symbolic power of a Highlander turned president was badly tarnished. The Highlands' political energy shifted from celebratory to oppositional, and protests became a sustained expression of deeper structural grievances, poverty, lack of services, and the perception that Lima's politics continued to ignore the countryside's realities. Parallel to political fragmentation, Peru confronted a security emergency that reshaped public priorities. Between 2019 and 2024, extortion reportedly rose sixfold. By early 2025, homicides had surged to unprecedented levels, a wave of violence that touched households from Lima's outskirts to Andean towns. The human toll was severe, families grieved, small businesses shuttered, and citizens lost confidence in the state's ability to provide safety. In response, many wealthier districts invested in private security and gated compounds, while marginalized neighborhoods were left to fend for themselves. Boluarte's handling of the crisis compounded popular anger. Reports surfaced of secret plastic surgery and of luxury Rolex watches circulating as alleged gifts from businessmen, images and accusations that clashed starkly with the suffering of everyday Peruvians. Most damaging were the deadly crackdowns on protesters in multiple regions, actions that led to dozens of deaths and deepened the narrative that the administration prioritized control over dialogue. Tourism in Cusco and other heritage sites dipped as safety concerns grew. Shopkeepers in Arequipa refused to pay extortion fees by closing doors. Commodity prices fluctuated as supply routes were obstructed. These combined pressures, rising crime, eroding trust, and scandal-ridden leadership, created a political environment where calls for accountability became louder and more unified across regions. What had begun as regional protests turned into a nationwide demand for a change of course, focused not only on one leader's behavior but on the state's capacity to protect and serve its population. The climax arrived in October 2025. After months of unrest and mounting accusations of moral and administrative failures, Peru's Congress convened in an extended late-night session. In a historic and unanimous vote, 122-0, lawmakers removed Dina Boluarte from the presidency, citing permanent moral incapacity. She refused to appear before the legislature to defend herself. The speed of the vote and its unanimity reflected both political calculation and a rare moment of cross-aisle agreement. Institutional actors sought a reset amid spiraling crisis. Constitutional succession named José Jerry Ore, the 38-year-old president of Congress, as interim president. He was sworn in immediately. But Jerry's pathway to power carried its own controversies, ongoing investigations into past conduct, allegations of impropriety, and questions about democratic legitimacy given that he assumed power without a direct electoral mandate. Peru thus entered another phase of institutional uncertainty, a new head of state with limited public trust and a complicated legal and political record. As Peru heads into the 2026 election cycle, the broader dilemma remains unresolved. The country has seen 7 presidents in less than a decade, frequent leadership changes that expose systemic weaknesses in party organization, decentralization, and judicial credibility. Can Peru channel regional differences into stable representation, or will fragmentation and distrust continue to produce short-term fixes? The coming months will test whether political reform, tougher responses to crime, and inclusive economic measures can restore confidence, or whether the cycle of instability will deepen, with consequences that reach far beyond Peru's borders.